I have been raised by my family as a son-in-law since I was a child. At the age of 20, I married Xi Ningbing. When I was 24, Bai Ningbing gave birth to Bai Yue. Bai Yue resembled Xi Ningbing very much. She was always quiet and reserved. She wasn't very close to me. Every night in the past, before going to bed, I would bring a cup of hot milk to the mother and daughter. But on this particular day, Bai Ningbing accidentally knocked over the cup. Xi Yue secretly poured the milk away. I suddenly felt a little tired. At the moment, I handed over the divorce agreement to Xi Ningbing. He furrowed his brows in displeasure and asked, "Is it just because of this?" "Yes, just because of this." "And what about our daughter? What do you plan to do?" Bai Ningbing's expression returned to the usual indifference. He asked me in an official tone. I sat opposite him, as if I were a guest at his negotiation table. I spoke calmly. "I will give up his custody. The house in the eastern suburbs will be transferred to his name. Consider it compensation for child support. After all, the child's surname is Bai, rather than following me. He and Bai Ningbing are the true family." Xi Ningbing lowered his gaze at me. His emotions were faint in his eyes. It seemed like he didn't understand what I was trying to cause a fuss about. Feng Yuan softened his tone. "If it's because of the milk, you can't get over it. I'll apologize to you. Last night, I was drunk. I didn't mean to treat you like that," he patiently explained. He still believed that it was the milk issue. Last night, Bai Ningbing came back very late from a social event. I waited for him half the night. I was awakened by the cold air he brought in when he entered the door. I climbed up from the sofa. I saw him uncomfortable as he took off his coat. The waiter immediately went to the kitchen and brought him the milk that had been warmed for a long time. In our marriage, though it couldn't be said to be very good, at least it was decent in terms of appearances. But last night, I asked one more question. "Who did you meet?" The men's cologne on him smelled somewhat familiar. Bai Ningbing suddenly let go of the hand that had taken the milk. I didn't react in time. The glass slipped from my fingertips and fell from the alley. In the lost warm light, the sound of it shattering disrupted the silence on the floor. Bai Ningbing's brows furrowed, his eyes cold. A tense aura surrounded him. He coldly stared at me. "Tell me, Feng Yuan, you've crossed the line. From now on, you don't need to wait for me at night, and there's no need to prepare milk for me anymore. As for my daughter Bai Yue, after seeing her mother's actions, she too secretly poured the milk away. I caught her. She stood at the door. With the same lack of emotion, she apologized to me. "Sorry, Daddy, Mommy won't drink it." I don't want to drink it either. Perhaps in their eyes, such a trivial thing. I shouldn't have made such a big fuss over it. I didn't offer any more explanations. I signed the papers. I entrusted the lawyer. I chose to end my marriage with Bai Ningbing. Xi Ningbing casually mentioned a lot about the division of assets. I didn't listen much. I wasn't really concerned. I went back to the room to pack my things. He lowered his gaze and scrutinized me. "Feng Yuan, the paperwork would take time. You don't need to rush. You can keep the house." I glanced at the still calm and indifferent woman. I answered her calmly with words she had once said. "Doing things clean and neat is always best, to avoid dragging things on, leaving unresolved issues." Bai Ningbing didn't say anything else. I never imagined that packing would be something I didn't know how to begin. The room was full of trivial things. Every little piece was something I had arranged myself. I scanned around. In the end, I decided to handle it simply. I dragged my suitcase toward the door. Xi Ningbing stopped me. "Where are you going?" "To your parents' house? I'll have the driver take you." "No need," I declined. I told him, "Remember to have the nanny clean up my things tomorrow. I won't take care of it. Anyway, they won't miss one less person to help." As I stepped out the door, I thought for a moment and turned back to Bai Yue, who was standing behind Xi Ningbing. With her ever-indifferent expression, I told her, I won't pick you up from kindergarten anymore. But remember not to go with strangers. It was my final explanation to myself. After saying that, I turned and left. I didn't look back at the child who had once cried during weaning, the one I had personally held in my arms and patiently comforted through the whole night. I bought a ticket to leave the northern city. I randomly chose a city in the south, since I was 14 when I was told I would marry into the Bai family. I had been deprived of freedom and choices. Later, I married Zi Ningbing, apart from attending some necessary events. He never took the initiative to suggest going out for a walk with me. The most common routine in our life was probably waiting for them, the mother and daughter, to come home every night. And before going to bed, I would bring them a cup of warm milk. The people in our circle always said that Zi's mother had trained me very well. I was essentially the husband tailor-made for Zi Ningbing. I was worthy of his status and could take care of his life. The only flaw was that I was too perfect. In fact, being perfect was somewhat boring. It made me seem a bit rigid. I once heard Bai Ningbing's friends tease him. Miss Z is so young, and yet she already lives the life of an old married couple. How does it feel? Your husband is just so dull. He's smiling like a mannequin. Do you want me and my sisters to introduce you to someone interesting? Just the other day, 2 of my sisters met a funny guy. He's really amusing, just like Su Rui back in the day. How about it, interested? Su Rui was Bai Ningbing's first love. Back then, Bai's mother didn't approve of them being together. Zi Ningbing resisted many times. Then I don't know what happened, but they broke up. Su Rui went to the United States. Then, when Zi Ningbing was 20, he suddenly accepted his family's arrangements and took the initiative to get closer to me. For years later, he had ZUA. Now I remember. The familiar perfume scent I smelled that night was the gardenia fragrance that Su Rui used to wear. After the man found a place to stay, I wandered around many places. The fine rain in Jiangmen, the misty alleys. Everything made me enjoy myself endlessly. Unexpectedly, on the morning of the 3rd day, I suddenly received a call from Bai Ningbing. He seemed to have just woken up. His voice was hoarse as he asked me, Fang Yuan, last year at the auction, where did you put the pair of ruby cufflinks you bought for me? I paused for a moment. In the second drawer of the wardrobe. Is there any particular occasion? Bai Ningbing replied, a shopping mall. Cutting the ribbon. The matching formal suit is the 4th one in the 2nd row. Zi Ningbing still seemed to be half asleep. On the other end of the phone, I could hear him rummaging through things. I could faintly hear him complaining. I listened for a while and asked, did you find it? The voice on the other side went silent. It seemed like he had finally realized. I found it, sorry. I didn't mean to trouble you. I murmured a sound of acknowledgement. I said, I know. I instructed him. Have the nanny tidy up the house again. If you can't find anything, you can ask them. From now on, don't call me and bother me. Zi Ningbing was silent for a moment. He simply said, all right. After hanging up the phone, I blocked his number. I fell back into sleep. But this time, I couldn't sleep soundly. I had many bizarre dreams. One was of me at 14, laughing and playing with classmates on campus. Another was when I first met Bai Ningbing at 15 on a sunny day. At 16, I secretly went out to race cars, only to be caught by my dad, who broke my leg in punishment. Then there was another sharp ringing sound. I was suddenly startled awake from the dream. Frustrated, I reached for my phone on the bedside table. It was an unfamiliar number. I pressed the answer button. A polite voice came through the other end. Hello? Hello, is this Bai Yu's father? I'm Bai Yu's kindergarten teacher. It's like this. Today, the kindergarten is hosting a robot demonstration event. Bai Yue is also participating. But he didn't bring his work. He said it was something his dad prepared for him. Would it be convenient for you to bring it for him? The teacher was very enthusiastic. I tightened my grip on the phone, shut my eyes for a moment, I just felt an indescribable fatigue. Not long ago, I was still sitting in the living room, looking down at the video tutorial, learning frame by frame, helping ZUA with his craft homework. I had just left so hurriedly that day. The robot was still a half-finished product. I looked at the bright sun already high in the sky outside the window. I softly replied to the teacher, "Sorry, teacher. Bayu's custody no longer belongs to me. I won't take care of him anymore. And is he with you now?" The teacher seemed a bit embarrassed. Yes. Bayu is right here beside me." I sighed. "Could you please turn on the speakerphone?" "All right. Thank you." The teacher's phone wobbled with noise. Then there was silence. "I think ZUA could hear me." I softly spoke. "Bayu, the robot is in your toy box in your room. You can call your mom to bring it to you, or you can ask anyone else to bring it. But from now on, I hope you don't call me anymore. I won't come to pick you up, and I won't help you with your crafts. You know, I'm no longer your father." After saying that, I once again apologized to the teacher and hung up the phone. To the child I had painstakingly cared for, saying these words was something that I couldn't help but feel sad about. I can't even remember when exactly ZUA started becoming more and more like Ziningbing. My marriage with Ziningbing was arranged a long time ago, since I was 14, when my grandfather and father, along with Biningbing's elders, walked out of the study smiling. I was raised by my family as a son-in-law. When I was in school, many classmates envied me for my good family background. I didn't argue. I could only smile bitterly. My life was comfortable, but it lacked freedom. When I took the middle school entrance exam, I didn't do well. In the middle of the night, my mom got more and more upset, thinking I had brought shame on her. She barged into my room, slapping me right across the face. In high school, I rebelled and started dating early. My dad slapped me again and warned me that if I didn't want to marry into the Z family, then I could marry into another wealthy woman, almost 20 years older than me. I first met Biningbing when I was 15. It was arranged by both families. At that time, Ziningbing was different from now. She was a cheerful, emotional girl who liked to smile. I didn't have a strong impression of her. I only remember the blue sky and her white shirt, along with a pair of eyes full of emotion. Later, I heard that she had a falling out with her family over her first love. I admired and envied her. At least she dared to resist. She had the right to oppose. But not long after, Ziningbing's mother came to visit my family. She had a polite and apologetic smile on her face. She held my mother's hand and assured her that everything was fine. The issue with Biningbing had been resolved. I hid behind the door listening, feeling very disheartened, thinking just as I thought. After that, my family started arranging more and more meetings between me and Ziningbing. At first, she was still quite resistant. She didn't give me a pleasant expression, but later she gradually accepted it and would occasionally say a few words to me. I also watched her. From a prickly girl, she slowly became quiet and reserved, hiding all her emotions. And the special gardenia fragrance on her also gradually dissipated in the air over time, until I was 20. Ziningbing was 24. That year, we were on our way to attend a banquet in City C, when we unexpectedly encountered a landslide. We were trapped in the car. Ziningbing and I were buried for a day and a night. When we were found by the rescue team, my last memory was my arm, which was above his body, being crushed. The car was pierced through. It was a bloody mess. When I woke up, he proposed to me. In front of both our families, he asked me, "Fang Yuan, do you want to be my husband?" At that time, he looked at my arm, which was wrapped in white bandages, and thought about us being trapped in the car. He nervously called my name, saying, "Fang Yuan, don't sleep. If you sleep now, you'll really never be free again." In a moment of impulse, I placed my hand in his palm. I also overlooked the calmness in his lowered eyes. It seemed like he was just completing a ritual he had to go through. We got married. For years later, as everyone had predicted, we had a child. From the moment Ziyue was born, he was loved and spoiled by both families. Ningbing's mother believed that he needed the best education, just like by Ningbing. So he poured out that cup of milk, and like his mother, he apologized to me with the most innocent face, while doing what he thought was only natural. I don't know what this mother and daughter really think, but just a week later, I received another call from Bai Ningbing. He was using a different number. Because I had blocked him. He had dragged things on. This wasn't something Ningbing would do. When the call connected, there was silence for a few seconds on the other end, just as I was about to hang up. Ningbing's voice came through. Fang Yuan, he called my name. Your parents said you haven't come home. Where did you go? Is it a man? He was checking on me. I knew he had the ability to do so, but there was an indescribable anger in my heart. In our past 9-year marriage, he was indifferent, distant. He and I were like strangers living under the same roof. Now, less than half a month later, the number of times he had called me had already exceeded the total number of calls in the past year. Before, when I sent him WeChat messages, "Are you coming home for dinner tonight? Are you in a meeting? Does your stomach hurt? Do you want me to make some porridge and bring it to you?" He would at most reply with an mm. The rest was just my own green world. Now it's as if nothing ever happened. And on the phone, he asked me hoarsely, "Fang Yuan, my stomach isn't feeling well after the social event today. Where did you put the medicine at home?" Ziyue caught a cold from a classmate at kindergarten. He has a fever of 38 degrees Celsius. He's been complaining of discomfort. What did you usually do to make him feel better? I was livid with rage. I barely restrained my fury. I tried to keep myself from sounding like a hysterical madwoman. I told him word by word, "Ningbing, we are divorced. I am no longer your wife. And I am not your nanny. Whether your stomach hurts or not, whether you can find the medicine or not, that's none of my business. Also, if you just asked around, there are still people who would buy you medicine. If the child is sick, talking to me won't help. I'm not a doctor, and I've never seen a mother who would still be asking the child's father what to do at a time like this. I don't know what you want to do. Maybe it's unwillingness. Maybe you're used to my care. But by Ningbing, I don't want to say anything harsher. We are done. Don't come and disturb my life anymore. Understood?" After saying that, I completely hung up the phone. I flipped over my phone, took out the SIM card, and threw it in the trash. In today's society, everything is linked to a SIM card. I didn't expect Ningbing and Bai Yue would call me every now and then. It's natural. I guess it's because I had taken care of them for so long that it's hard to get used to. I got a new SIM card with some cash. I signed up for an academic research group and went with them to the Northwest. It was a project I had seen online. When I brought it up, Ningbing said he didn't have time. People in our circle laughed and said it was too shabby. Fang Yuan with the Bai family status. Such a low-budget tour group. That's so embarrassing. I smiled faintly and didn't say anything more. At the time, I thought it was just a passing thought. My family would never allow me to act so recklessly. I never imagined that now it would be so easy to break through. The lock was broken. The person bound by chains must start struggling from the depths of their heart. The day I left with the research team, the sky was clear. The journey was by train. The entire train ride was shaky. Every time I fell into that bewildering dream, I would slowly be shaken awake. As the first light of dawn broke, I felt confused and lost. The research trip was done in a large loop following a list of locations. We started from Shining and headed to Qinghai Chaka. We passed through the Chaka Salt Lake. Then we visited Qingtang, Chaidan, and the Devil's City. The Mogao Caves rose from the desert. The crescent moon-shaped oasis at Yueaquan was tranquil under the night sky. We traveled to Dunhuang and passed by Jiyuguan. We walked through the countless colorful Dangsha landscapes. Most of the people in the research team were geologists. They looked like they weren't very talkative, but could speak passionately about a pile of dirt, a blade of grass, or an unnamed wildflower. Occasionally humorous, sometimes witty, they filled the vast, sparsely populated Northwest with abundant vitality. Undeniably, my good family background and the years of training from my family allowed me to witness many things that others couldn't experience. In the past, in my understanding, I thought that going out for a trip had to be more enjoyable with family. But now, trekking in Yadin, camping in the desert, roasting lamb, the dust in the air, made me see even brighter stars in the sky. I knew Bai Ningbing would still check my itinerary, but that no longer mattered. Later, when the Northwest Loop ended, I exchanged contact information with these new friends. After a few days of rest in the city, we set off for the Sichuan Tibet route. When I reached the peak of Mount Everest, I suffered from severe altitude sickness. My breathing was rapid. My head was splitting with pain. I almost thought that I was going to die on this highest mountain. But in the distance, the sun illuminated the golden mountain. Everyone at the top was cheering. In the midst of the passionate and chaotic atmosphere, I cried out loud. The team scrambled to give me oxygen. They handed me high-sugar drinks. They thought I was in too much pain. They quickly tried to comfort me. "Hey, don't cry, kid. It's okay. Your oxygen levels are coming up. Don't be scared, we're here for you. You're not going to die." "Yeah, buddy. How old are you?" "You'll be fine. You've got a long road ahead." This is just the beginning. I cried uncontrollably, but in the end, the accent of the northeastern guy made me laugh through my tears. With their help, I stood up from the snow and faced the distant sunlit golden mountain. I faced my true feelings. No matter how many locks there are, no matter how difficult the journey is, I can still reach the summit on my own. Isn't that right? After returning, I rediscovered some of my old hobbies, like extreme sports, like racing, like raising a little dog I love. Before I was engaged to Bai Ningbing, I was actually a carefree and joyful person. I loved everything full of life and vitality. But later, I didn't even have the freedom to pack my own things. So how could I talk about love? I raised a mixed breed Maltese. I named it Ann. It had soft caramel-colored fur, innocent big eyes. Every time it ran, its ears would flap up and down, like a little gas canister. Dogs are easier to get along with than people. Dogs understand your needs. A dog will never neglect you. A dog knows that you love it, and it loves you back. And the next time I saw Zi Ningbing, it was at the door of my new home. I was about to go out for a walk with Ann. When I opened the door, I saw Bai Ningbing standing at the elevator. He was holding Baiyu's hand, and Baiyu A was nervously staring at Ann in my hands. "What are you two doing here?" I sat across from Zi Ningbing and asked him coldly. Zua was lying on the couch, frowning, staring at Ann, who was showing off. Zi Ningbing silently studied me for a while. "Fang Yuan, you've lost weight." I lifted my eyelids. "Stop dodging the question. It's because our daughter wanted to see you." I couldn't stop Bai Ningbing. I asked him, "Do you remember what I told you last time? We are divorced. Please stop disturbing my life. Can't you understand that?" Zi Ningbing's expression became tense. "Fang Yuan, Yua is still young. She can't be without her father." I laughed and called the community security and had the mother and son escorted out. Zua didn't want to leave, standing stubbornly at my doorstep. She seemed to want to say something, but opened her mouth I held Anne in my arms. I didn't even glance at her and firmly shut the door. I was afraid that if I looked again, I would instinctively soften my heart. He is the child I have cared for day and night. I have held him, loved him. The first word he ever said was daddy. When Bayu A was little, he would cry when he saw anyone, but only when he was in my arms. He was quiet and adorable, but later, Ziningbing said I didn't raise the child properly. I used so-called elite education to raise him. The growth of a child is always shaped by the teachings and values of the family. Whatever he was told, he would remember it and act on it. As he gradually grew up, he stopped wanting to be close to me. He began to distance himself from me. Just like Ziningbing, his manners became distant. He would call me dad, but speak to me formally. Dad, could you have mom teach me instead? Grandma says you don't have as high an education as mom. You can't teach me properly. Dad, why do you always stay at home? Don't you have any hobbies? My classmates' dads all have hobbies. Dad, you're too serious. You're not like Uncle Rui. Uncle Rui always has all kinds of new and fun ideas. After I told the security guard not to let anyone in without permission, Ziningbing changed his approach. Sometimes he would wait for me at the entrance of the community in the mornings. He would sit in the back seat of his Maybach, as if he hadn't slept all night. When he saw me come out, he would hand me a hot breakfast. You don't eat breakfast in the morning. It's bad for your stomach. Just eat a little, okay? Sometimes he would also bring Zua along, following behind me while I walked the dog. I would deliberately walk past them, never glancing at them. Neighbors I met while walking the dog, sometimes curious, would ask me, "What is your relationship with this striking mother and daughter?" I would truthfully tell them, "My ex-husband and the child who prefers the other man." They would suddenly understand. Then they would immediately take my side. Every time they saw the mother and daughter, they would warn me in advance, telling me not to go out just yet. Out of sight, out of mind. I would smile faintly and tell them it was fine. I no longer cared about them. Ningbing has always been very busy. There are many things waiting for him at the company. He can't keep bothering me like this. I've seen him tired, sitting in the car, receiving call after call. Perhaps it's the company. After all, he's been taking Zua with him for such a long time. Sometimes Bayu would secretly, behind Ningbing's back, have the driver take him out to find me. Then, without saying a word, he would take small steps, following behind me with each step. I was focused on walking Anne, feeding him water, tempting him with treats, and would happily wag his little tail. He would softly call out to me. Zua was watching from the side. He didn't say a word, but his eyes were filled with anger. Children aren't as good as adults at hiding their emotions. One time Anne ran too fast. Bayu couldn't keep up. He anxiously fell onto the stone path. Finally, he couldn't hold back and cried out loud. He looked at me with tears in his eyes, pitifully saying, "Dad, I know Zua." Once he understood things, he rarely cried. Probably because his heart was full of discomfort. He was extremely aggrieved. He lay on the ground, crying uncontrollably. I quietly watched him, not making a move, until the bodyguards following him rushed over and picked him up from the ground. In the past, Bayu often got sick. Every time he was ill, I would feel the pain and heartache along with him. But now, my heart is as calm as still water, no longer stirred by the slightest wave. My life now won't be affected by the appearance of his mother and him. A while ago, after returning from the trip, I signed up for a racing club. I thought I would pick up some old hobbies again. I didn't expect to be fortunate enough to qualify for a race selection, even though it was highly likely I'd be eliminated in the first round. I still prepared seriously for a long time. The race was scheduled for a week later. On the day I was leaving, I bought a flight ticket for the early morning. With the tense pre-race preparations, I was excited yet calm. The wind on the racetrack ripped through my vision. Time stood still in the friction between the tires and the ground. The sweat under my racing suit was tightly pulled by the chase. When I took off my helmet and stood on the podium, drenched in sweat, the cheers from the audience erupted in waves. Second place was a result I hadn't expected at all. As I walked out with the crowd after the event, I saw Bai Ningbing holding Ziyu's hand, standing in the crowded crowd. Bai Yue was holding a bouquet of flowers. As if he was afraid the flowers would be ruined, he cautiously avoided every person passing by him. The moment he saw me, Zi Ningbing nodded at me, a faint smile blooming in his eyes. He uttered two words from the shape of his mouth. It was probably a congratulations. Ziyu's face turned bright red. She excitedly waved her hand at me. Kui Shengsheng shouted, "Dad, you're amazing!" The surrounding crowd watched us with smiles, but I only felt annoyed. I walked out holding my things. Bai Ningbing came forward with Ziyue. "Fang Yuan, you can do these things too? Why didn't you mention it before? Dad, you were so handsome just now. You have no idea how nervous I was when you overtook that car." I pretended not to hear. My steps didn't falter. Zi Ningbing gently tugged at my hand, lowering her voice to ask me, "Fang Yuan, how about we have dinner together tonight to celebrate? Yue really misses you." Bai Yue listened and immediately looked at me with hopeful eyes. She tried to stuff a bouquet of flowers into my hands. I pulled my hand back and avoided it. "I'm very busy, no time. You guys go ahead and eat." Bai Ningbing was a bit scattered in her work. Bai Yue hadn't been home for too long, so her mother inevitably reached out to me. I looked at the woman in front of me, the one who once looked at me, and who now had a distance from me. A sense of indescribable sorrow filled my heart. Maybe it was because we were both parents. Or maybe it was because of Ziyue. "Fang Yuan, the reason I chose you back then was because you were quiet and reserved, a person suited to be my daughter's son-in-law. But now, Zi Ningbing and Ziyue, both of them are affected by your absence. How is this different from Su Rui back then? Fang Yuan, come back. Do it for your mother's sake. Give Bai Ningbing another chance. Your mother was never the kind of demanding lady from a wealthy family. On the contrary, she always spoke gently and politely, just like how Zi Ningbing and Ziyue treat me. I think if it weren't for his daughter and son An, he wouldn't have put aside his pride. He wouldn't have sat in my small two-bedroom apartment, begging me to give Bai Ningbing another chance. But Auntie, Zi Ningbing doesn't love me. Our marriage between us two has already wasted 9 years of my life. When you chose me back then, you valued my family, not me. Now I've fulfilled everyone's wishes. Our two families are closely connected, never to be separated. I've also had a child, just as you hoped. Bai Yu has now grown up. Even without me, my family will take good care of her. Are you going to give me back my freedom? Once my dad broke my leg. He killed the puppy I raised. I was timid and cowardly. I didn't dare to resist. Later, I married Zi Ningbing. They achieved their goals. Then Bai Yu was born, with an inseparable blood tie. I no longer have any purpose. The most important thing is, Auntie, I no longer love Zi Ningbing. My first love started with Fang Yuan. If I fall asleep, I'll never have freedom again. Would you marry me? Maybe I can give you freedom. But later, the girl who slayed the dragon became the dragon. She forgot the promise she casually made. Sigh. She sighed deeply. She spoke to the air. Did you hear that? Bai Ningbing's mother tried her best. Beside his handbag, the phone screen lit up. It displayed Zi Ningbing's name. The call was in progress. That evening, Zi Ningbing appeared at my doorstep. Fang Yuan, I still want to try again. I know I wasn't good before. I neglected you. Can you give me a chance to make up for it? Can we start over? I silently looked at him. I think I've made myself clear enough. Ningbing despondently rubbed his messy hair. He was always attentive to his image. It was rare to see him like this, disheveled. He wore a charcoal gray suit, but had blue cufflinks. The contrast of colors was too glaring. It was a big mistake. In the past, I personally coordinated every outfit for him. But now, all I could think of was, when would he leave? Ningbing looked at me with a pitiful expression. Yes, I love you. Fang Yuan, I just didn't cherish you before. I've never loved anyone. I didn't know how to love. That's why I made you sad and hurt. Until you left. I realized that I can't live without you. It's all my fault. Fang Yuan, can you give me one more chance? And Yue can't live without you either. Every day, she cries and insists on finding her daddy. No one can comfort her except you. Can you, for the sake of the child, not be so resolute? He said he loved me. He said he had never loved anyone before. When I met him at the arranged family gathering, he told me, Fang Yuan, I have someone in my heart. You know that, right? At that time, he was having a serious falling out with Su Rui and his family. Later, after we got married, I heard that Su Rui had a new girlfriend in the United States. He came home drunk for the first time. The next day, my mother asked when we were going to have children. Bai Ningbing smiled foolishly on the spot. He asked my mother to change my perfume to a special blend of gardenia. The scent was the same. Everywhere, every time, there was the shadow of someone. But he said he had never loved anyone. I looked at him mockingly. What about Su Rui? Bai Ningbing froze. It was as if his lies had finally been exposed. He lowered his gaze and seriously said, no. Su Rui left Fang Yuan. There was never any Su Rui. When I refused to listen to my family's arrangements back then, I did it on purpose. I've only ever loved you. From start to finish, only you. It's laughable that I used to think Bai Ningbing ignored me, that he treated me with emotional abuse, that it was because of Su Rui and he resented me. An irresistible feeling. I know, but I don't sympathize with him. Then Bai Yue was born. My feelings for Ningbing gradually faded. It was just a numbness, a sense of routine. I did things that suited the role of a son-in-law. I placed my hopes on Ziyue. I longed for someone in this family to be truly connected to me. At the beginning, Ziyue became my only comfort. Then 2 years passed. The expectations I had also became thorns embedded in my flesh. Ningbing may have loved me, but compared to his face, dignity, and other things, he had just grown accustomed to my care and omniscience. In our marriage, no matter the reason, he ignored me and emotionally abused me. I naturally believed that I should sacrifice for the family. These were unchangeable facts. No one learns to love, and no one is incapable of loving. We only cherish it after losing it. It's just unwillingness and not having met something better. When we were young, falling in love with anything was not a mistake. But when we mature, letting go of anything is not wrong. Ningbing, save some dignity for yourself. Ningbing had always been a proud person. He understood my words. So the last time I saw him, still at my home. Not long ago, I went to Xinjiang with a group. The summer rains are frequent. I got caught in a few downpours. And with everything happening lately, when I came back, it was inevitable. I fell ill. When I woke up feeling sick and miserable from the darkness, it was Bai Ningbing who helped me sit up. Bai Yue was leaning by the bed, worried, asking in a soft voice, Dad, how are you feeling? Is there anything uncomfortable? Mom and I can take you to the hospital. How about that? Ningbing placed a pillow behind me. He told me, when I saw you returning in front of the neighborhood gate at night, you were staggering. I just knew something was wrong. After I followed you upstairs, I found you collapsed at the door, fainted from the fever. I had someone give you an anti-fever injection. How do you feel now? Are you still uncomfortable? He asked softly, carefully offering me something. A glass with milky liquid. It was a warm glass of milk. You didn't eat much tonight. Drink some milk to warm your stomach. Fang Yuan softly called my name, with a tone like a familiar person starting to scold me. You can't take care of yourself at all. If it weren't for me and my daughter today, no one would know if you fell ill. Fang Yuan, come back home with us. How about it, let me and you take care of you. I looked at him awkwardly as he said this, while Bai Yue kept nodding by the bedside to show agreement. Bai Yue smiled, reaching out to take the glass of milk. The next moment, she released the glass and it slipped from her fingertips. With a thud, it shattered, spreading dust everywhere. The white milk spilled across the floor. I pointed at the shattered marks and slowly said to Xi Ningbing, look, the cup is broken beyond repair. The milk spilled and there's no going back. And not long after, the door to our house was knocked. The sound of many people talking came from outside. Bai Yue went to open the door. A group of people noisily entered. Each person was holding something in their hands, carrying a pile of things. They surrounded my bed completely. Hey, young man, how did you get sick? I told you that day, don't get caught in the rain. But no, you insisted on going into the rainforest. Little brother, are you still feeling unwell? Big sis brought the soft candy you said you liked last time. If the medicine is too bitter later, take one piece, I promise you'll feel better. The crowd was chattering away. Finally, they noticed the presence of the large and small figures in the room. Who are these two? I saw Xi Ningbing and Bai Yue, and my body instinctively tensed up. So amidst all the attention, through the crowd, I smiled and introduced them as unimportant. A friend and his daughter. They won't be seen again. They're leaving right away. After all, they were just children. Xi Yue suddenly collapsed, crying loudly at the door, shouting, I don't want them to leave. I want my dad. The noise was so loud that An barked a few times at him. The Bai family immediately came out from their hiding place, taking the child away, helping the woman who was running with her feet. I had once sailed the same boat, but like spilled water, there's no going back. The river and sea cannot be paused. In the extra chapter, when Xi Yue was 12 years old, he finally gathered the courage to face Xi Ningbing and her daughter. He said he was going to find Fang Yuan. He couldn't understand why such a simple thing. Bai Lingbing would try so hard to stop him. Xi Yue didn't know, but over the past few years, Bai Lingbing had visited Fang Yuan. The reason she didn't let Xi Yue go was because Fang Yuan had remarried and had a very cute little boy. Bai Ningbing thought that her marriage with Fang Yuan had been a failure. Fang Yuan was so meticulous, and when he felt sentimental, he wanted to completely move on, but she never imagined that Fang Yuan wasn't at all like what she thought. He had even become someone Xi Ningbing found unfamiliar. He smiled heartily, lived freely, as if that was his true self. Bai Ningbing suddenly remembered the first time she met Fang Yuan. The boy was silent and calm, sitting across from her, holding his mother's hand. At that time, Bai Ningbing had been managing herself. Having heard about the arranged marriage, it made her angry beyond measure. Naturally, she couldn't stand it. This young boy, for years younger than her, who appeared so awkward and shy. In those years, she argued fiercely with her family. Later, even her grandfather had to intervene. There was no choice. So Xi Ningbing reluctantly agreed to break up with Su Rui. Su Rui was a classmate from university, with a straightforward personality, and without hesitation, he agreed to help with this request. At that time, Bai Ningbing didn't know Su Rui had feelings for her. 1032. Later, he felt guilty. After Su Rui came back, they had a few meals together. They talked about some collaborative projects. Xi Ningbing originally thought that such practical matters would make Fang Yuan forgive him. At least, he hadn't truly wronged Fang Yuan. He always believed that his mistake was placing the Bai family's control over him and directing his resentment toward Fang Yuan. That's why he was indifferent to him, unconcerned about him, which made Fang Yuan's heart grow cold, unable to endure it any longer. That's why they divorced. It wasn't until Xi Ningbing saw Fang Yuan's life after marriage that he realized what he had truly missed. Fang Yuan married a policeman. He had met the policeman during a spontaneous road rescue. The policeman's job was demanding, but he always found time to take Fang Yuan out for a walk, to see the mountains, to see the sea, to seek the source of all life. Whatever the policeman had to do, he would inform Fang Yuan as soon as possible. When he finished work, he would buy anything interesting or new he had seen on his way, or take photos and send them to Fang Yuan. They shared their lives with each other. They loved each other. And soon after, they had a son. The son, when learning to speak, loved to hug their Maltese dog and run outside. As the boy grew a little older, at kindergarten, he would boast to his classmates every day, "My dad is so amazing. He can make crafts, and he can drive race cars. Do you want to come over to my house and play? I'll introduce you to my dad." Xi Ningbing felt like a shadowy rat, peeking into someone else's life. Sometimes he wanted to call Fang Yuan to ask how he was doing, what he was eating, but he would hesitate and silently retract his steps. Afterward, he never asked about Fang Yuan again. During one year's spring festival, after attending social events, Xi Ningbing returned alone to an empty house. He tugged at his clothes, feeling uncomfortable, and called out, "Fang Yuan, I'm a little thirsty." He thought he would be greeted by a warm light, a cup of warm milk, but the only response he received was boundless darkness and silence. The overwhelming regret pressed Xi Ningbing so hard he could hardly breathe. His figure gradually slid from the entrance, and in the darkness, his painful cries echoed.